Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Crumpin, District Director for Assemblymember Cecilia Aguiar-Curry. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover some Zoom housekeeping items. For any of our viewers wishing to ask questions, please submit them below, and we will be addressing those after our speakers during the Q&A portion of our town hall. We will now hear from Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry and our distinguished panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy everybody could join us today to talk about broadband access, infrastructure, and deployment. My name is Cecilia Aguiar-Curry. I represent the 4th Assembly District, which covers all of Yolo, Napa, Lake, and portions of Colusa, Solano, and Sonoma counties. I'm so excited to be joined today with my good friend, my dear friend, Assembly member and colleague from Santa Rosa, Jim Wood. Dr. Wood has worked tirelessly to expand broadband in California, particularly in our rural counties to the north. And he is equally committed to this issue as I am. So thank you, Jim, for being here with us today. I also want to take a moment to thank all the elected officials and local stakeholders who are watching today. They are our boots on the ground, and they do tremendous work in our communities. And I'm honored to have our very own Lake County Supervisor, Bruno, who will be speaking later on. You know, we have a wonderful group of panelists to hear from you, so I will just jump right in. You know, let's face it, broadband infrastructure across the state is either deficient or non-existent, and certainly not equitable when it comes to access, cost, and speed. Although barriers to broadband connectivity have existed for decades, the COVID pandemic highlighted the digital divide between those who can depend on fast, reliable internet as a normal part of their daily lives, or for those who cannot. Many of us were able to pivot to online services, work at home, distance learn, use telehealth to connect to our doctors. But what about those communities that have absolutely no internet connectivity? The heartbreaking reality is that 1 in 8 California homes still do not have sufficient internet access. And small towns and communities of color face even higher numbers of students and families who remain disconnected. I represent a large part of rural California that is geographically isolated to broadband internet. We're deficient in internet and certainly no stranger to emergency disasters. High-speed, reliable internet is not just about downloading a movie or streaming your favorite show. It is a public safety resource and an essential component to keep people safe and informed. It allows us to access information and strengthens our safety net, literally. For example, we cannot use life-saving capacity of telemedicine without making critical investments in our state's broadband infrastructure, particularly in our hardest to reach areas. As we upgrade our health systems, we must equally upgrade our broadband infrastructure to take advantage of the innovative capacity of telemedicine. It is simply unfair that not all Californians can equally benefit from this essential resource. So that is why I authored Internet for All Act of 2021, which prioritized the deployment of broadband infrastructure in California to the most vulnerable and unserved rural and urban communities. My legislative colleagues and I, in partnership with the Governor Newsom, invested a historic $7.5 billion towards this effort. This is a critical step forward in our mission to construct, improve, and maintain an equitable broadband infrastructure. This work will require all hands on deck approach, and I am so excited to work with our local governments, our Native communities, our anchor institutions, and stakeholders who can all contribute to be a part of this solution. Before we get started, I wanted to note that a comprehensive discussion about broadband must include all communities, including our Native communities. So I want to thank the Yochadihi Winton Nation for being a part of this discussion. They will be speaking later on as well. But I want to quickly introduce Tribal Chairman Anthony Roberts. Thank you for taking the time, Chairman. I know that you have another meeting to jump onto, so we wanted to give you this opportunity to speak, and it's so nice to see you. Welcome.
All right. Hello. Thank you so much. First off, again, I want to thank everybody for giving Yochidihi this opportunity, and a huge thank you to Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry for hosting this virtual town hall. As you mentioned, we are pretty busy today, so we have a tight schedule. I will leave you in good hands as our Director of IT, Brian Seibel, will be speaking a little later to, some of the key points that go over my head a little. But we felt as a tribe and as a council that it was important to get on here and thank Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry for her continued support for rural, unincorporated, and tribal communities. I know that we've had a great partnership, and you've helped us done tremendous things west of the 505. And this initiative is no different. The tribe has been working on broadband and connectivity issues, I'd say, for the better part of 2 decades, unfortunately to no avail. And, we're just excited and extremely honored to be able to jump on with Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry and support this mission and this initiative moving forward. As she alluded to, we know how important this is, not just for fire, life, and safety, but education, and of course, those streaming aspects as well. But yeah, we wanted to get on as a council and the tribe and say that we support this mission. We continue to support Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry's initiatives, and just again a big thank you to everybody who is behind this initiative and continues to support it. And as I said, I appreciate the time and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Chairman Roberts. We all value and appreciate your commitment to this issue, and look forward to working with you and finding solutions together to make sure we get internet for all. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jim Wood, who is the Assembly Member for District 2. Dr. Wood has been a strong advocate for broadband, including passing legislation to push Caltrans to improve its Dig Once policy and serving on several legislative committees to implore service providers to do more, especially expanding middle mile and last mile in the rural areas of California. Welcome, Assemblymember Wood. It's so nice to see you, and tell your story.
Well, first of all, thank you so much to Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry for including me in this forum. As luck would have it today, I'm having some connectivity issues, and so I've had to improvise. I got my car and drove so I could use my iPad, which has cellular service, and here I am. So it is like a little ironic that here we are talking about internet and broadband, and here I am struggling on a day, but that's not unusual for me in my district. Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry and I have both worked on access throughout our legislative careers. She's been a phenomenal partner and a voice, an unavoidable voice, quite frankly, for getting her constituents online. And for that, she's a treasure, and it's an honor to work with her. In 2021, we saw some big dividends from our years of advocacy. We saw SB 156 outlines a historic investment in broadband infrastructure that, in tapping into significant federal dollars, will dramatically lower the barriers for Californians to receive high quality and reliable internet access. And I'm going to put an exclamation point on reliable today with my personal experience. So, and while I have the floor, I do want to take a moment to mention the bill that Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry did talk about, AB 41, which was signed by the governor in September. AB 41 did 2 critical things for broadband. The first was to task Caltrans with deploying fiber-ready conduit in roadways that are improving they're actually roadways are improving in priority areas. Put simply, if Caltrans has already opened up the road, we can't miss the opportunity to get fiber in the ground where we know we will need it. Second, AB 41 tasked the CPUC with updating the maps that define access in our state. You all know this, but one household with connectivity does not capture the experience of an entire census block, especially in rural areas. So previous maps just did not illustrate the true magnitude of the digital divide in our state. And we hope with this new policy that we will actually get a handle on the true magnitude and make huge steps in getting it done. I also have the privilege of serving on the Middle Mile Advisory Committee. We actually have a meeting tomorrow. In that role, my colleagues and I are responsible for overseeing the development and construction of the middle mile, essentially to getting providers to build our last miles to businesses and homes. Have a meeting tomorrow where we'll receive an update from Caltrans, the Department of Technology, and the CPUC on the status of the middle mile deployment. Those meetings are public, so if you have a chance, I encourage you to hop on and tune in because your input really matters. The commissioner can speak more to this, but I wanted to make sure that everyone here today is aware that the CPUC's methodology of and proposal for last mile allocations was recently made available. Opening comments are due November 30th, so please do take the time to participate in the process. You can find more information about this on the CPUC's website. It's important to be clear about expectations. We'll be building a significant infrastructure and are making huge strides. And as a result, dramatic improvements in broadband service will not appear overnight, although as much as we would all like it to happen. I'd ask you to continue to engage as you're doing today. This once in a generation investment only works if you keep us accountable. And trust me, I plan to keep everybody accountable as much as humanly possible. So we make sure that the proposed infrastructure meets the community needs. Thanks for attending this town hall today. Your presence means you are participating in the process, and the more you participate, the better off we're all going to be. These investments and infrastructure improvements only work with your input. So thank you again for including me, Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry. I look forward to building on our work. And I might go to just my photo here so that I don't bounce around so much, but I apologize. And thanks so much for including me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Assemblymember Wood. And the good thing is that we know we have momentum, and I really appreciate your extra push to make sure we get internet all. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So on that note, I want to move on to Brian Seibel. He's the Director of Technology with the Yochadihi Winton Nation. And welcome, Brian.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and hopefully learn a bit more about the efforts that are being made throughout the state. I'd like to focus in a little bit about the comments that the tribe had submitted previously to the CPUC, I believe about a year or two ago, focused in on three key areas, which is funding resources allocation, coordination with network operators and service providers, and adequate and timely outreach. And we felt, or the tribe felt, that these were three of the key areas that we should make sure that we don't forget about as we move forward and make these great strides across the state to make sure that everybody's connected. So with funding resources allocation, we need to create needs assessments of rural areas and tribal lands. Coordinate those efforts with not only the providers, but the counties and cities as well, to ensure that we don't duplicate our efforts and we ensure that the plans are really focused in on the middle mile and last mile efforts that are necessary to make sure that we meet the goals of and objectives of all these items that were put before us to bring us into the digital age. We should create infrastructure that promotes and allows for competition to keep service costs low as we develop this, because we can't forget that it's not only access to, but it's also, we need to make sure that it's affordable, because not everybody can pay $150 a month for a combined service. Just doesn't make any sense. We also need to streamline access to the funds and reporting requirements. We find that these are often complicated, and usually that'll turn tribes and businesses away from trying to access these public funds to actually create the middle mile and last mile improvements that are needed. Under coordination with network operators and service providers, we want to make sure that we can create or provide an outreach program as we go through this for tribes and counties or rural communities to be able to communicate with all so that we are all on the same page as we move forward. These efforts should allow for direct communication with tribes, because this could actually promote partnerships with not only the counties that we reside in, but also with providers. You know, there's opportunities all abound as we go through that process. You know, we could provide anchor points. We could, you know, give a little bit better feedback, thorough feedback, not only for our tribe, but for those rural residents that live around us as well. What plays into this is the adequate and timely outreach that we need as we go through this process. Tribes often are left out or thought of as an afterthought anytime anybody reaches out for projects large as this is. So we want to make sure that we include tribes early on, because the earlier on that the tribes are involved, the better off we're going to be as we draw up these plans and figuring out where pathways are going to go. The tribe actually has a cultural department, which has, you know, identified culturally sensitive areas that we'd like to probably avoid as we build out this infrastructure. And the earlier we get into that process, you know, we can avoid those early on, and it's a much smaller cost to redirect a route somewhere else to avoid that area. And then often tribes have been open to holding conversations to discuss the efforts with the digital divide, and we want to make sure that these tribal and rural communities are included. So whatever efforts we can do to help facilitate conversations around this would be beneficial to all. And we've only seen this become more and more important as the pandemic goes on, as we have relied more and more on working from home and needing internet to do basic things like healthcare and doing schoolwork. It was a real challenge for the tribe to actually get those things done in a timely manner, in a way that was actually, you know, going to be, excuse me, going to be beneficial for all the citizens. I just wanted to finish up by saying thank you to Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry and her team for putting together the town hall today.
We do need to, thank you very much, Brian. We do need to make sure we keep the tribal community intact and that we have those conversations early and often. So let's move on to Martha Guzman-Esquivias of the California Public Utilities Commission. Commissioner Esquivias was appointed by Governor Brown in 2016, and it's an honor to have her here today. And I will say Governor Brown is really anxious to get internet, just saying. She represents the commission on the California Broadband Council, among many other accomplishments. So thank you for joining us today. We were hoping you could talk about the technical aspects of broadband and the steps the commission is taking to address our state's broadband issues. And you think I'm kidding, I'm not.
Oh, I know you're not. He calls often and frequently. Thank you, Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry, for inviting me. And I was going to share a slideshow here because it is a bit dense of material. So if you'll just let me pull that up and just let me know when it's up here. And let me get it to the right. Where's that little button? There it is. Okay. Okay, folks, able to see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And as both you and Assemblymember Wood mentioned, this really, I can't overstate the tremendous nature of this package. And this, you know, not just the CASF extension that was a tremendous amount of time, but also the one-time, you know, the huge investment that I'm going to talk about again with the federal news that we just received over the end of last week. So these are the big chunks: the middle mile, the last mile, the loan loss reserve to really help enable those public and tribal systems that were just talked about, and the technical assistance that was also talked about. And I just want to note, we have an existing tribal technical assistance program, and so that will also continue. We have few key roles that I'm going to walk through because as was mentioned by Assemblymember Wood as well, Department of Technology is really the lead on the middle mile infrastructure. And we have a very clear role, which is we're pulling the data together. We've run the public process on recommendations that where did we get it wrong? Where are we missing? And also this other element that Brian was talking about, which is all the other soft elements, like, you know, having early consultation, what is a affordable rate? And I'm talking middle mile rate. So we're in the middle of that, and we've received so much great information from everyone on the ground. And we're hoping to be able to finish our final recommendations by the end of the year to really keep on track with this tremendous amount of investment. We are the second part of the implementation of the broadband package is the federal funding account. And this is the, if we go back here, this is the 2 billion amount. And thank you, Assemblymember Wood, for mentioning that we have a couple of proposals out for comment on how we administer the federal funding. It is a competitive grant program, but it also has the legislature directed us to really do a couple of really creative math in the midst of all of that. So we have to have $1 billion for urban and rural, and we were tasked with defining that. That recommendation is out for comment. Really would love to hear your perspective on that. And each county will receive at least $5 million. So there's the formula, and most importantly, there is a lot of flexibility to get these projects on the ground with this funding. And of course, as was mentioned by Assemblywoman Aguiar-Curry, we have the extension of the California Advanced Service Fund. Because these funding sources have different requirements tied to them, they are in 2 separate rulemakings for us, but we're obviously going to work in partnership with ourselves. So I will be happy to share this as a follow-up document so that folks can get more of the detail on subscribing to the listservs. Okay. This is just a quick visual on all the different components of both the middle mile, the last mile, and the long haul. And most of you already know that. This gets into what we are in the midst of doing now, which is we put out an initial proposal of the 8,000 miles that we can build this public open access middle mile. And this is just a little bit of a visual of what that looks like with much great input that we've received so far. Okay, this just lays out the process again that I talked about, and I do encourage you, if you have time, to join the Middle Mile Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow that Assemblymember Wood mentioned. The last mile funding. This is a couple of things that we're looking at here, in addition to the allocations that the legislature directed us to do, is also to look at the federal funding. And I'm going to talk a little bit about not just the existing federal funding, but we are now tasked with the even greater opportunity, which is how do we make sure we spend this federal funding that's from ARPA, and how do we prepare for this longer duration federal funding? The local agency technical assistance grants, these are so critical, as was mentioned already by Brian, in terms of getting those chronic areas that lack the planning, that lack the technical capacity to a point of feasibility. And so that was a big role. RCRC and other local government advocates, CSAC, the League, everyone really pushed great for this allocation. That proposal is out for comment, and we've received a lot of comment. I think Commissioner Houck is preparing a decision on that. The loan loss reserve, this is perhaps one of the more innovative pieces of the package, which includes a set aside for essentially providing this guarantee for those really innovative pieces of the puzzle, which is local public infrastructure and service provision potentially. Okay, so these will be sent to you. I just also wanted to update you on what we know thus far from the federal package, the infrastructure package, and $65 billion nationwide for broadband infrastructure. There is four agencies, FCC, obviously, NTIA, that's going to have a lot of the adoption programs. USDA has gotten an additional bump there for $2 billion, and US Treasury authorized a chunk that isn't getting a lot of notoriety, but $600 million in these government secured bonding authorities, which will really work well with the $750 million on our state side. Right now, our folks have just done, back of the envelope estimate here, and we're thinking that the state of California will likely get 2.3 billion of that federal allocation. Again, that large 65 billion, 2.3 billion hopefully can come directly for projects in California. I think that's the big one there. Okay, so I think that was the summary. I'll stop sharing and really just we'll have this to you, Assemblywoman Aguiar-Curry, so you can provide as a follow-up with more of this information. But more than anything, I just want to really share how excited we are to be in this moment, to be able to be not just doing our old attempts, which was, trying to entice providers and carriers, trying to incentivize them through state funding. But we really shift the paradox here where we're saying we're going to build a public backbone. We're going to put it in areas that need and have been chronically neglected. And not only that, we're also going to put in much greater flexibility on how we can fund the last mile. So I want to thank you for your consistent leadership and, decades really. I know from your Winters project that I was able to visit. So you're no new player to this issue, but I definitely think that what happened over this last year certainly was not something I would see during my tenure. So I'm very excited to be having a role in helping implement it.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And you've been a stalwart fan of trying to get this to move forward and trying to be flexible. So again, thank you so much. Look forward to our continued working relationship here. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. R Pimentel. He's the president of Woodland Community College in Yolo County. And Art, it's so nice to see you. Again, we've been a long time friends. We've seen this kind of grow as we go forward. And I'd like you to please share and see how it's going to shape education for our community college students or all education. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Aguiar-Curry, and good afternoon to everyone joining us. Very, very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I think there's a common denominator that you're going to hear throughout, Assemblywoman, that we really do appreciate your advocacy. I know you're a champion of not just broadband, but certainly higher education and the opportunities that exist for our communities, especially our rural communities that we are trying to serve. And we know that education is the great equalizer, and in our society, in our communities, especially our rural communities where you have a lot of low-income individuals, migrant farm workers community, and that's the area that Woodland Community College really serves. Colusa County, obviously North Yolo County, and large parts of Lake County, especially in the city of Clear Lake, where we have a center. And this pandemic really highlighted, I think, a lot of the issues we've known for many years. Assemblywoman, you've known for many years the digital divide that exists in a lot of our rural communities. We have these technology deserts where we have very little access to technology, and a lot of our students really suffered because of that during this pandemic. And what we saw throughout the pandemic in the last year and a half is that many students that didn't have access to this technology simply just decided not to come to school, right? The only option they had for the most part was, have access to technology or internet or computers, or just not come to school at all. And thankfully, through a lot of advocacy and through federal and state funding, we were able to get some of the technology that was needed into the hands of a lot of our students, getting them the support that they needed for them to get the computers, We gave out, loaned a lot of computers to students throughout all 3 of our campuses, because we have our main campus in Woodland, Yolo County, and 2 centers, one in Colusa and Williams, and the other one in Clear Lake. And I'll tell you that in areas of just in the ratio that we saw of students that needed computers and MiFis and Wi-Fi access, because we also provided those directly for our students through state funding, through federal funding, that we were able to get that access to the technology that students needed. And proportionally, we saw a higher percentage of students needed it in Lake and Colusa counties than even Yolo County. And Yolo County really is still pretty rural community, right? Rural communities. Although sometimes we get bunched in with Sacramento all too often. But really that's what it was about for us, is making sure that we provided the students with that access to the technology. It was important that they got computers, that they got access to the MiFi, Wi-Fi. We increased hotspots at all 3 of our campuses. That means that students could come onto our campus, to our parking lot, to on-site, and actually have access to Wi-Fi at all 3 of our campuses. We expanded it to cover all of our parking lots, which made a huge difference for students, that they were able to do some of their work and homework. And we opened our facilities when we were able to do so after the pandemic, but at least we were able to provide some level of technology and access to technology. One of the other things that we really have done is partnered with our K through 12 districts to increase not just the technology piece, but courses, online courses to our high school students, college level courses that transfer to a UC or a CSU. We've been able to partner with each of our K through 12 systems in Yolo, Conocti in Middletown and Lake, and of course, Colusa County, Esparto and Knights Landing, and of course, Woodland Joint Unified School District, and really try to increase the number of classes that students had access to during the pandemic and now even currently. And I'll tell you that one of the bright spots, if we could even call it that, is that our high school students across our service area at Woodland Community College are taking a lot more online classes at the high school while they're enrolled in high school. And as a matter of fact, we've seen from last fall of 2019 to fall of 2020 to fall of 2021, which is the current semester that we're in, we've seen a 100% increase in dual enrolled classes from our high school students. And this is across all 3 of our service areas, including Lake, Colusa, and the Woodland main campus. So that's really important for us to note, because again, we want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities, not just to our adults and those who are recent graduates from high school, but also our high school students, because we know that the data shows that the sooner you are introduced to college level courses, the likelihood that you'll go to college and that you'll actually finish. And so those are really the areas that we've focused on and that we're trying to do. And I could tell you that we can continuously hear from some of our rural communities or students in the rural parts of our service area that they just really would like to get that increase to technology that they need in order for them to be successful. I could probably keep going on and on about a lot of the work that we can do and that's needed and that we're going to move toward. But again, I appreciate all of the work and the partnership and you being a champion of Woodland Community College, Assemblywoman.
Hey, well, thank you very much, Dr. Pimentel. And I'm really proud of what you're doing. My heart is full when I hear all the things you're doing for students in education. So thank you very much. You know, with that, I'd like to introduce Bruno here. He's the chairman of Lake County Board of Supervisors. They have some really good things going on. You know, we struggle up there in Lake County, but you know what, we're going to show everybody what the wonderful things that we're going to bring forward to them. So Supervisor, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry, for the invitation and the opportunity to speak. And I hope today that I can inspire some people to take some action, because it's not just going to come to us. We still need to do the hard work. I want to talk about where we started. We live in a very rural community outside of our normal community hubs. We have a lot of sparsely populated areas. People are still hearing the fax machine noise of their modems. as they try to access the internet, and that is just not adequate for the needs of today. With COVID, we've been propelled into a situation where even today, we are using Zoom to have this conversation where 2 years ago, this would not have been the case. Things have been forced to change, and I think we need to embrace it. And I think this bill does embrace it and move us in the right direction. How did Lake County get on the map when it comes to broadband? We want to change. We couldn't rely again on our ISPs to make that change. We needed to take matters in our own hands. We connected with the Upstate California Connect Consortium that is out of Chico State University. We worked with them to create the first statewide county master broadband plan on what exactly do we have in our communities? Where are we lacking good access? Where do we need to focus on? We were able to find out all the speeds that people are accessing. It wasn't the most perfect of identification because again, it was based on census tracts, but it helped us create a plan and an understanding of how could we match this plan to the grant funding that was available. Now, to be honest, the grant funding was dismal and is dismal until just recently with the changes that we've seen. And so in this plan, what we did, which is really important, is we created a list of assets. What kind of towers do we already have? What kind of water towers? What kind of peaks of mountains can we access to really have the ability to access as many people as possible? We're looking at wireless and we're looking at fixed wire. We're looking at whatever is possible. So now what's new that's making this a better situation for Lake County? We've been talking about the middle mile. The middle mile has been our absolute impediment to being able to move forward. Now we just have to focus on the last mile. The last mile is basically what ISPs have written off when penciling out their programs and their upgrades as this is not cost effective. Now we're going to be able to really fulfill the needs of the people that are not within the last mile at this moment in time and provide them that level of access. AB 14's goals of 98% saturation is amazing. Rural California needs that level of saturation, and I hope that Lake County could get to 100%, and I believe that we can. We're very topographically challenged, but at the same time, it's an asset to us, and we need to utilize it to the best of our abilities. The other part is that we're already starting to work with our local partners, whether that be our corporations such as Mediacom or AT&T. We're also working with our local ISPs. And we have finally turned to the other side where they're providing us the maps of where their infrastructure is. That was a difficult task. And so now we're sitting at the table, we're actually trying to create projects because we want to be best positioned to access these dollars as soon as they're made available to us. And without an actual project, it's just an idea without a plan. And so we want this put in writing. We want to get it all set up, more than just a concept. That way, when the money is truly available to us, we can be best positioned to get that and make change in Lake County. And what does change mean for Lake County? Change means better communication, and better communication is the absolute critical foundation for better economy, better education, better healthcare. And when it comes to fire safety and any other kind of emergency, Lake County is no stranger to be able to have better communication with the public and between our first responders. It is critical that we enhance and deploy better infrastructure to broadband. So I'm very proud of the fact that AB 14 has passed. Couldn't be happier to work alongside with Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry and making this happen. And I'm really looking forward to the infrastructure bill as well on top of that, that can help elevate us even further. It is just such an opportunity right now, and Lake County is not going to miss out. We're also working with RCRC, and that's probably going to come next. Barbara Hayes will talk about how we're all working together to, again, better position ourselves, have project ready. I hope that everyone else is moving in this direction. It's not about waiting for the money to come to you. We need to do what we need in preparation for the funds to be truly available so we can jump on it as quickly as possible and make that change right here. Rural California is going to change forever.
Well, thank you, Supervisor. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the enthusiasm, and thank you to your Board of Supervisors, because I know they're 110% behind you to try to get this to work. And that's what it takes. It takes all of us to do that. And it's all about leadership.
Absolutely.
So with that, I want to thank you very much. And I want to move on now to Barbara Hayes, Chief Economic Development Officer for Rural County Representatives of California, also affectionately known as RCRC. And they have been a standout voice and advocate for our rural communities. Bruno just alluded to them. And so welcome, Barbara, and share all the great things that you guys have up your sleeve.
Thank you, Assemblymember, and thank you for including us in the conversation today. I think everybody on this call in this event can agree that rural California has largely, we are the pocket of unserved and underserved, among others, but largely in rural California. And this landmark legislation that passed earlier this year, that has been alluded to earlier by Commissioner Guzman-Azavias, really kind of is the wind beneath our wings, and then the subsequent passage of AB4 and other pieces of legislation that boost it up. And really, to Supervisor Sabatier's comment, we are meeting the moment at this time. So RCRC has, as you mentioned, had an incredibly robust and dedicated governmental affairs advocacy effort for decades around broadband. And what we've done of late, though, is we've really developed a program of work that moves beyond lobbying and advocacy and takes the good work that comes of that effort and really makes it into something out in our rural counties. So RCRC represents 37 of California's 58 counties. Those that are the most rural. And on our member counties' behalf, we are doing two things that I'll mention very quickly here today that might be most important for this audience to hear. Is we're taking two tracks. One is what we call foundational readiness. So we've gone out to all of our member counties and invited them to participate in a grant that we wrote on their behalf. Each county had the opportunity to opt into the grant. And what it will do is, and 26 of our counties opted in, is it will, at the end of the grant project period, allow for each of our member counties to have in their hands a broadband strategic plan. And this is the first, again, foundational readiness, the first and most important tool to really get started and get involved in these conversations. We want to arm our local government officials and staff with the information they need to have a seat at the table to be in charge of the destiny of broadband for their area and their constituents. The second other important piece, and this is a big step forward for RCRC, but again, it's time to meet the moment, is we are going to get into the broadband deployment space in the sense that we are introducing a new model for broadband deployment in California called the Open Access Public Benefit Municipal Broadband Infrastructure Model. And we are actually going to take that on and deploy infrastructure that we will then invite providers onto the infrastructure to deliver service to customers. This is a model that is prevalent across the United States. It's not as prevalent in California. And we feel that by introducing this model, we'll introduce choice to rural California, to our member counties, that will create competition and drive down price in so doing. And drive up standards as well. So affordability and access being key. So we're really excited about the opportunities that are presented. I will say in SB 156, the commissioner presented all of the pots of money that were made available under SB 156. As important to rural California was some language that had nothing at all to do with dollars that enabled us to be able to do what we're proposing to do. So again, I can't leave this without thanking you, Assemblymember, for your tenacious leadership around this subject. I know it's been at your forefront for years, and we're happy to be able to be a part of implementing what you've created.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara. I'm privileged to have you all on board, and it's going to be a good wild ride, but we're going to do it. So thanks again to all of the staff and all of you at RCRC. So let's move on, and I want to thank everybody. But so far we haven't got to meet with Trish Kelly. She's the managing director. She works with the Valley Vision. Her and her colleagues have done incredible work, taking amazing steps to support local communities in developing a broadband master plan. So thank you, Trish, for being here today. She's my buddy. She's been here by my side for 12 or 14 years, And so it's a pleasure that you could join us today. Thank you, Trish.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry. It's just such an honor to be here and to see we've been on the ground and in the field for a long time, and we've got so much progress and opportunity, and it's been a long haul, but we're really excited. And I want to thank you and Assemblymember Wood for your leadership. I had the honor of giving Cecilia the award at the California Economic Summit last week for her leadership, and it was so well deserved. And I just want to thank you again for being in the trenches with us. And so at this moment here, I wanted to note in our region, being on the ground, we're funded by the PUC to be the Regional Broadband Consortium for the Capital Region. Just everything that everybody's mentioned, urban, rural, suburban, and all the challenges that we've seen through the pandemic, but they're longstanding challenges. And so now we really have the opportunity to address the lack of resources, the lack of competition, and the need to really help our communities have the capacity and the resources to connect everyone. So Valley Vision also manages the Sacramento Coalition for Digital Inclusion. And what's really become apparent through all of this work is that we greatly need the infrastructure, but we need all the pieces. People need access to devices, to affordable internet, to digital literacy and digital skills. So we're trying to take a full blown approach to this. And we're so grateful for the state investment, the transformative investment, but also AB 14 and SB 4 give us the long-term mechanism, the 10 years to really get the job done. And working with the PUC on the allocations, that is an issue that will be coming up in the coming year. How will the legislature do all the allocation for the California Advanced Services Fund? We're grateful for the reforms and the flexibility, because we've had applications into the PUC sometimes that take a long, long time to get approved and on the ground. There are challenges and there are other processes. So I feel really, we feel excited and energized because these new resources are bringing new partners, including providers, to the table. So that is really a critical opportunity for us. So I think I could say, in terms of talking about what we need going forward, there is a network of the regional consortia across the state. They're going to have an expanded role. And we've been at the same funding levels for the last 10 years. But I think if we're going to really address the broader mission of digital inclusion and helping our communities get ready in a much more robust way, I think the technical assistance funds that are coming and the loan loss reserve fund and these other resources for local governments are really important, and partnering with RC and others. But what we find on the local community level is that even things like policies and ordinances, such as what Assemblymember Wood addressed, not everybody is ready for the infrastructure project. So we're working with the California Emerging Technology Fund. We have a Getting Connected resource guide, and that's what we're working on in our communities and with partners across the state to give everybody the tools that they have so that they can deploy as quickly as possible. One other thing I wanted to mention, we also work with our federal agency partners, and we're looking at some of the implementation challenges of the new funding coming out. So for instance, the emergency broadband benefit, it's a great opportunity for people to get connected, but there's been a lot of uptake challenges. There's research that shows in California we're not uptaking at the level of eligibility. So we know that we need resources for things like digital navigators, trusted brokers to help residents get signed up. We need more resources for devices and digital skills building. So these are the kind of things that we really hope, in partnership with the state, we can take a holistic approach. And one final thing is, with all the federal sources coming down, what Commissioner Guzman Aceves showed us, there's so much now. We've been in a desert. Now we're in sort of a beneficial side, but trying to understand what is there and how we can access these resources, and having the state help us not only get our fair share, but invest wisely and strategically will be really helpful. I wanted to note that we did apply for an NTIA application under the recovery funding for the city of Ileton down in the Delta. And the only way we were able to do that is that the supervisor, Don Natoli from Sacramento County, gave us funding to get a grant writer to be able to get that application in a very fast time frame. So it's an example of the kind of capacity that we need so that we can really optimize our resources. So again, I want to thank you again, Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry, and excited about the journey ahead.
Great. Well, thank you again, Trish, and thank you to all the panelists.
So thank you again for our amazing panel. We will now be moving into our Q&A portion of the town hall. We will ask our panelists to try to keep your answers to 90 seconds if possible, only because we want to try to get through as many questions as we can. We will likely also go over the 2 p.m. Time frame just by a few minutes. So if panelists do need to leave for other meetings, we certainly understand. We really appreciate you being here. The first question we have is, when will funds begin to be used to start building broadband infrastructure? And is there a deadline for using these funds?
Who's going to answer?
Would you like me to take some of that?
Sure.
Okay. There is some of the funding that was put in the state package. I don't know, by the way, the most recent federal package, what the timeline is there, but I don't think it's very short. I think that was the whole goal of it, to really provide a longer term recovery. But for the ARPA funds, there is a time frame, and I'm going to, if anyone else knows it off the top of their head, but we do need to have encumbered the money. I think we're down to probably less than a little over 2 years.
That's
But
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also some general fund money in that package that does not have the same time constraint.
You're so right. We need to get this done sooner than later, and we don't want to lose the funding. So we do have a time frame of less than 2 years. I think the clock's ticking.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, at one of the last Middle Mile Advisory Commission meetings, it was disclosed that there would be up to a 15 pilot middle mile project. Do we have any updates as to where construction will begin, as well as the process to determine those sites?
Assemblymember Wood, if you're still on, can you take that, or anyone else?
I think that's, hopefully we'll get some sort of an update on that tomorrow. But I don't have an answer for you. But that meeting is tomorrow afternoon. I can't remember the time. I'm sorry. Somewhere in my Zoom
1 o'clock.
calendar. 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Yes, I did try to put the link. Hopefully everyone was able to see the link I put in for that, because I do think it will be an exciting conversation. Maybe I can switch it over to the chat while we're chatting here. And we've all been very excited and working hard on getting these initial projects to go. So there'll be a full presentation on them tomorrow.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Next question is, what opportunities do residents have to influence the decision-making on placement and construction?
Let's see, who would like to take that? Martha, this is probably, or in the past, maybe Trish, some ideas where the public's been involved.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a question in relation to the middle mile, because most of the other funding areas are competitive grants. And so, you know, kind of the model that Trish and Barbara and others talked about in terms of getting projects together and then really seeking applications is the majority of it for the last mile funding pots. For the middle mile, this is where it's really exciting because the state is taking a very proactive role. And so we're going to be finishing the recommended routes for building. And we're currently taking comments. If you have comments, you can still send them to us. We did put the formal comment deadlines in already, but I can't even tell you how specific people have been in terms of where the routes should go, where there's connecting facilities, infrastructure for connecting to other middle mile or long haul. So there is still time for that. And I did put a link up earlier on the links to our proceedings where you can provide that to us. And then that's not the end. Then, as you mentioned, you know, Assemblymember Wood and others are on the Middle Mile Advisory Committee, and that is going to continue. That's going to be a public forum for, everything that comes up, to have a place for the Department of Technology, who's, working with Caltrans to build. They're going to be really, that'll be the ongoing venue, and we'll certainly be helping with anything that's needed, but it's not going to be kind of a one and done. It'll be an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, and if I could note too, that we're building off years of work in terms of the mapping and working with our local jurisdictions and communities to get a lot of input. We already know where the priorities are. We're still refining those, and it's a good iterative input process. And we're working with our councils of government, for instance, on the strategic broadband corridors. But that data is all being integrated into the middle mile planning, and then we have our local projects. So, but I do encourage everybody to be in touch with their local governments or their consortia too, to make sure that we're tracking all the local input.
And I'm just going to chime in is that, a phone call to your city, your county, your tribal, your JPAs, whatever, and have those conversations with them is really important right now. And we have been, as we were hoping that this bill would get through a while ago, we have had conversations with League of Cities, just for example, to tell the cities, you got to get ready. If you need to change some kind of zoning or ordinances to get the middle mile in, we need to have those discussions now, sooner the better, because time is of the essence.
Great, thank you so much. These are just wonderful questions and answers. Next is, how can we expand the number of internet providers in a specific area? For example, Arbuckle in Colusa County is mainly dominated by one provider and lacks provider options.
Open access middle mile.
Open access middle mile, exactly. We've gone through this, right? All of us that have worked on this for quite some time, is that it has been a barrier. We were hoping that we would have more competition with some past legislation we did, and it didn't go where we had planned. And so therefore is the bill that you see now, the trailer bill from the governor, as well as mine, Assemblymember Wood, Senator Gonzalez. So we've kind of had to circumvent and think outside the box, because we wanted to make sure it's competitive. And by number one thing, affordable access for everyone, and making sure that it was reliable. So we've, I understand where Colusa is coming from, because we have been fighting in that county for quite some time, because we just have one provider who didn't follow through to the poor city of Arbuckle. So we are fully aware, and we have been hunting them.
I will say again that all of the changes, the policy changes, and the leadership and the dedication and the resources is changing things at the local level. We've been doing a lot of outreach with providers over the years, but they're starting to come to us more, and they're interested now. So that's, I think it's shifting, which is really great.
I would just add that I think the story of Arbuckle is not an isolated story. I think that's happened in a lot of small communities throughout rural California. And if there are communities out there that have, for example, their own local utility, electric utility, or other infrastructure, there are opportunities potentially for small cities to develop their own system in partnership with some providers out there. So I know that the city of Healdsburg, where I was on the city council, was looking at that possibility, and I think now with this new opportunity, they may take a fresh look at it, as may some of the others.
And there's places such as up in Plumas County that are doing incredible work as a JPA, and we may be able to take some of their ideas and help move the process along as well.
Yeah, the Yuba City just contracted with an infrastructure builder, which is different than an internet service provider, to do a fiber-wide network, and they're getting a fee for the use of their conduit. So that's the other thing in this whole world of looking at your ordinances, is how you can monetize your rights of way and other things, so that you can create these kind of partnerships. So it's exciting.
It's true. It's all about partnerships. We have time for one more question. And that is, with regards to sufficient broadband speeds, what is the current standard and what is the goal we are trying to get to? And will increasing speeds translate to higher out-of-pocket costs for consumers?
I think, Martha, you should answer this because you and I went the rounds on the speeds in the past.
Okay. Well, the current federal minimum is 25 down, 3 up. The governor's executive order is 100 down. And most of the legislation that we were talking about on the state side is also 25 down, 3 up. And to build, so there's 2 different metrics. We're building ideally to 100, and we're identifying areas below 25.3 as areas that we really are unserved. So, when you ask me, is it more expensive or less expensive? It's really about how far we take the fiber arteries out into the community. And but in terms of anything in that range, it shouldn't be more expensive, because I don't know if you've ever noticed that most of the time when you're paying, whatever your service provider is, from one speed to the next, it doesn't require them to come out and put in some form of infrastructure. They're usually taking out some sort of barrier in order to get you that higher speed. So, of course, not in the places that are unserved, but it shouldn't, does it cost money to build? Yes. Does it cost more money to build to 100 symmetrical versus 25.3? Yeah, because we want to get it out to all of the communities and all of the households. And I think there's also important to note, we have to have that goal. And maybe, let's say it takes us a little longer to get those arteries out, but if we have that goal, we're going to get to that goal. If we are just content with a lower speed threshold, we're not going to build towards that. So we can build in stages to get all households served at that speed, but we have to keep that as our vision.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to these amazing questions, to our guests for their interest, and the questions for our panelists. For questions that were not answered, we will work on posting the answers on our website, so please check back. Feel free to call our office with any questions as well. And now I would like to turn it over to Assemblymember Aguiar-Curry for her final remarks.
Well, thank you, Tracy. And I want to thank all of the folks who joined us today, and to those who submitted questions. We still have a lot of work to do. So your direct feedback and experience with this issue is very important to this discussion. One of the biggest challenges, aside from identifying where the broadband gaps lie across the state, was how to secure this funding. And now we have something to work with. The next steps is preparing our local governments to tap into the fiber network, and once it's constructed, Therefore, it's imperative that local government have the tools and the technical assistance they need to create the broadband strategic plans and to apply for grant funding. We must work to increase the digital literacy in our communities, because it will help to bridge the digital divide. And we know the lack of broadband affects both our urban and our rural communities. However, I want to reiterate that rural communities already face an uphill battle because of their sheer size, much smaller and remote populations, and geographic proximity to urban centers. Rural communities are no stranger to having 1 or 2 sole providers for basic services, and they certainly don't enjoy a competitive market amongst internet service providers. We have areas that have absolutely no internet connection, and the only mode of communicating with the outside world is by telephone. So the digital divide cannot be completely resolved until all of our communities have affordable options and equal access to reliable internet and sufficient speeds. I want to thank all of my panelists today for taking the time to join us today. Your expertise and feedback is invaluable to the conversation, as well as to all of you that are watching today. Please log in, look at all the information that we will have out there for you. It's imperative that you have your voices heard. And I want to thank all of you for your continued support on this issue. And I look forward to continue working with all of you to achieve internet for all. Thank you.